Hi, I'm Rasheed Ogunlaru, coach, speaker and author. I want to talk a little bit about today a little bit about a topic that a very good friend of mine who's very wise and very bright invited me to record a video on, and that's on the topic around self-discipline. And were asking me a question about, how is it somebody can become very disciplined to do what you're wanting to do? It might relate to a piece of work, a project, studying, whatever, and that thing about focus. So I think when we're talking about self-discipline, or you might be looking at it from the other side, or how can you beat procrastination, discipline, motivation, procrastination, all of these things are really linked. And there are a number of factors to it. It's very, very deep and very, very, very rich. Let's pick up with starting with that thing about self-discipline. It's very interesting, isn't it? Because I feel, therefore, I should be starting out from the perspective that I should be very disciplined to do this piece of work, this project, this piece of study, this task that I know it is that I'm meant to be doing. So I think there's a few things, who is the self that we're talking about, and what's the discipline that we're talking about? From a perspective of how we experience ourselves, discipline isn't very a nice place to start off with. It, the self, the ego, isn't really particularly interested in being disciplined. It wants to be free. It wants to express itself, right? So that's one element of it, and it's relevant because sometimes there's that feeling, that energetic feeling that I know there's this thing to do, but I'm not really interested in it. I'd rather be doing something else. You can feel that energetically within your body, even if that's not the words that you're actually saying, or even if that's not what you're actually consciously thinking at that particular point. So we need to be mindful about that. The self doesn't necessarily, as we experience it most of the time, doesn't necessarily want to be disciplined. Let's touch on a little bit about this thing about motivation. I've done a separate video about motivation, but it's really important to know about what motivates you. Do you want to do the task? Do you want to do the job that you're supposed to be doing? Do you want to be doing that project, that thing that is there in front of you, that is there to be done, or that you've got to turn to at some point, or that you feel that you should be turning to? Are you motivated by it? Are you interested in it? Do you really want to do it? Do you have to do it? These are all important factors that we need to be mindful about in that. And it might well be that the answer is, well, I'm not particularly in that, but the overall thing I am, or that, I'm not sure if I'm motivated by this job, this career, or these particular piece of client work from now on in. So there might well be information in there that's bubbling up for you about that. Is this something that is resonating with you anymore? It might well be the case that that too often you've been in this particular situation where you're not motivated by something and it has required discipline, and that you're not interested in doing it. So you need to be mindful about that. And if it is something that constantly is a feeling that you have, then maybe it's something that particularly if it particularly relates to your job overall, finding the discipline to get up and go to work, or to go to that job, or to do this particular course, then is that really motivating to you? That's part of it. There's part of it also that us being mindful about what is actually involved in anything that it is that we are, any particular task that we're undertaking, because we have all sorts of projections about what we actually think is going to be involved in something, as to whether something should be easy or whether something should be quite difficult and so on. My friend very shrewdly flagged up to me, said, sometimes if you don't think about something too much, it then is far easier. And that is often true, because we will have all sorts of ideas and concepts about that task, whether it's easy, whether it's difficult, whether we should do it now, today or tomorrow, how long it will take, and how intense it will be, how much energy it will take, and all the stuff that I may or may not forego, or other stuff that might be going on. So mind has all sorts of noise relating to anything. So you're right, if you're able to be stiller, if you're able to be calmer, or step back from that. And that's why so often somebody's got something to do and they'll step away from it, or they go for a walk, or a rest, or a nap. That can be very powerful. Incidentally, I wrote this at a time where this particular topic is something that I'm feeling right now, so I thought it would be really good to talk about. And this particular task that, on paper, I promised somebody that I would write them a particular proposal by the end of today, and that I had that particular today. Fortunately, it's interesting how things will energetically happen. Actually, there's a couple of things in my diary that have fallen out of my diary today, so I have, on paper, more time to do this particular task. I also know that on paper, I'll probably be better doing this particular task in the morning. But energetically, that wasn't where I was feeling energetically, and I'd learned to go with the energetics. And it's very interesting that whilst I haven't done that, there's all sorts of other things I have done today, including 3 more of these particular types of video. So, and I make that point because, you know, sometimes when we're focusing on what we feel that needs discipline, or that we should be focusing on, or that we're procrastinating about that, sometimes there's other stuff that we may not be as consciously aware of that's going on. It might be the fact that at that time actually you need the rest, that you don't have the energy to do that particular task at that particular moment. It might well be that there's something else that is bubbling up that actually that you have more energy for at that particular moment. So it might well be something else that you could do far more effectively than that particular task that you feel you should be turning your mind to. And this is why goals and time frames, project plans, and all of these things should always be a guide rather than a tie, because if you're too tied down by them, then you're going to be too rigid, and you're just going to be caught up thinking, I should be, and all the time you're not. So I think all of this is an invitation to become mindful and aware of your own patterns, your own habits, the times when you are energized, the times when you're not. And what is it that actually needs to be done? And so many things may seem to present themselves as though they're urgent. Does that particular task actually need to be done today? What would happen if that task isn't done today? Does that task need to be done this moment? Maybe even if you take 5 minutes and you step away and you do something completely different, the energy might be greater. In my own particular case, when I'm mindful there's a particular task to be done, I like to give that task back to my mind to be aware of, rather than to try and tackle in and do. If the energy is there right then to do it, then I'll do it. Just in the same way, if there's energy is right there and there's the momentum there right then to have a cup of tea, to have some glass of water, to eat at that particular moment, because that's where the feeling is, then you'd go with it. But in the same time, it might well be that that's something that is kind of bubbling up, and it needs more time to fine tune that essay that you're wanting to write, that particular email that you need to write, that particular phone call that you need to make. It's there and it's bubbling up. But the more and more that you have a narrative about this is what it should be, or this is how it should be, or it should be done by this very, very precise time, then the more problem it may well make for you. There will be times, although not as many times as they present, that of course something needs to be done by a particular time. And then this in itself is very, very useful for us to be aware of, because actually when you look at these themes, procrastination, motivation, and discipline, when you are very often coming up against a deadline, a real deadline, then all of a sudden all the noise quells and you get on with that writing, you make the call, you get on with it, you do whatever it is needs to be done, you get out the door, or whatever it is that you need to be doing, because there is a greater intelligence than purely the narrative that we're often, the narrative level that we're operating on. There's a far more knowledge about the whole physiological state of being, our own ability, our own energy, our own momentum, when we're ready, when stuff is cooked, if you like, within us. So I think the more it is that you can be at ease with yourself, and to be mindful of a task, yes, or aware of this is when things have said that they need to be done, when I feel that they need to be done, this is how I feel when I'm at my best, this is how I'm feeling about this particular task at right now, so that you can become far more mindful about yourself, you can be far more mindful about the tasks that present themselves, and the situation that you're in, and you can have far more fun around it. So I think that, you know, it's also quite good to actually explore, well, what are your results actually have actually been in the past? You have this notion about how self-disciplined you are or you aren't. You have this notion about how effective that you are or you aren't. You have this notion that you're not particularly good at deadlines, but what has the reality actually been? Very often that it may well be the case that the results are different to the story that it is that you're telling yourself. There may well be times then, if you're finding that then you are missing the deadlines, you are missing that they're doing the particular work and so on, that then you need to then gently ask yourself, actually, does this resonate with me? Does what I'm doing really resonate with me? What really does feel right for me? So that you're able to get to a place where the things you're doing and you're pursuing in life far more resonate with you in your heart. and then you will find that there will be far less pressure or less stress. That's not to say that life won't ever have those moments of pressure or stress, but they will not be anywhere near as pronounced. So that's been quite a quick tour around these themes, around self and around discipline. Perhaps I want to round off by again stepping a little bit back to this thing about self, discipline, procrastination. What is the self that we're talking about? What is the discipline that we're talking about? Who wants to be disciplined? Which is the self? Procrastinating what? Putting what off? What actually needs to be done? What's actually important in life? Suddenly there's a space. Do you feel it? There's a space around it. Who wants to do this? Why am I doing this? What's really important here? What really needs to be done? What's really important here? We might discover that something else that's very, very far more important. Being with that person. Doing something with the heart that you actually have. Meeting people with where they're at. Sometimes that may take you to an even richer place than your concept of that particular task, of that project, of that thing that needs to be done, in that particular way that you think that needs to be done. All of a sudden you step back, and there's more insight, there's more magic, there's more possibility, far more to bring to the essay, far more to bring to that project, far more that you can put into that thing that you need to write, far more that you can bring to the table. How magical is that when we're not limited by that? And we realise that that's a tool. And to not get too caught up with the narratives that are going on, and that we're present, and that we're available, and then we embrace ourselves and our gifts, and rather than admonishing ourselves, giving ourselves a really, really tough time about things, because that doesn't really help, does it? And I think that's the side of the discipline that can then be damaging, isn't it? Because you've got to be careful if you're talking about discipline that you're not damaged and you don't flatten that stuff, that you're putting oneself down, you're overly pressurizing. Putting pressure on for a period of time can work, but for a long period of time things will become stressed, or they will become depressed, or they will become damaged. So really be mindful about that. To procrastinate, sometimes that's just to wait, isn't it? It's another word for waiting. Maybe you're waiting for something that's far more important. Maybe you're waiting for the right moment. In terms of procrastination. So that's a slightly different take and a different space. Again, finally linked to that, how does what you've been asked to do, what you feel you should be doing, sit with you? Where does it sit? Are you coming about it from the right place with the right heart? How does it feel? So you're not just thinking about something. How does something feel as well as how you think about it? Suddenly you've got more scope, more possibility. Anyway, wishing you all the best. I won't keep you anymore. You've been very, very disciplined to be sat there watching this. Thank you very much. I'm Rasheed Ogunlaru, coach, speaker, author. Take care. Bye-bye.